hot take. Do you have to contain it? Right. I think like if you have like good safe areas to like play with it and explore, like do you want to contain it? Because like the gains you're gonna get off of not containing it are probably greater than like the risk. And no one's saying like ship everything to prod and force push to main. Like that's not the same thing. But I think like going in and just tearing at something without a lot of like worry behind it is probably going to gain you a lot more ground forward. Like,
hello, everyone, and welcome to the Modern Web Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Ocel, VP of Innovation at This.Labs, joined by my very favorite co-host, Danny Thompson. He's the Director of Technology at This.Labs. Danny, how are you doing?
I'm here.
I introduced you like a secret agent. I was like, it's Danny Thompson.
There you go. I like it. I'll take it. Honestly, things are good. Things are very, 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 very busy right now. So right now, for those that don't know, I do a tech conference in Dallas, Texas, and it's coming up as of the time I'm recording this in like 6 weeks. So it's pretty hectic here at nights and on the weekends.
6 weeks? And my God, that's fast.
Time flies, man.
Yeah, this year went by quick.
And yeah.
All right. Well, we are so excited to have this conversation. We're joined today by Cody De Arkland. He's the head of developer experience at Sentry. Cody, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's a Monday. We're starting Hack Week at Sentry, so there's a lot of fun stuff going on. It's a good time of life.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you know what? That's such a beautiful intro to the first question I wanted to ask you, which is just that for people that are outside of the organization, we see people like you posting the fun things that you're playing with, just your excitement for developing and just building things in this space. I think for anybody that's been following in kind of the agentic coding world. And the founder world. I mean, David Kramer has done so much in just like explaining his journey and what he's going through and playing with AI. Like, talk to us a little bit about that engineering culture at Sentry and why it's been so much fun. Like, is this intentional part of your guys' DNA to be so playful and experimental?
Yeah, it's funny. I joined in December, and this was like one of the big things that was part of like when I was asking questions about coming aboard. Like this topic came up a lot, and I would say like in the first few months it was definitely pretty obvious that was definitely a part of the culture. But I think around that same time, we started seeing like some of the big moves happen inside like the AI space. You saw like Cursor really started to take off a ton. You saw like Claude Code pop up, and like all these things that really started like lowering the bar even more to like jumping into this. And then it just kind of blew up like gangbusters. Like everybody was jumping on it. And so yeah, there's definitely a big culture of experiment and try things. What I love about Sentry is like it's very much a company of like see a problem, solve a problem, and they're very welcoming to anybody who wants to like jump in and try to solve it. And so yeah, it's definitely a part of the culture. It's probably one of the most fun things about it, honestly. And David's just so good at like breaking down his journey in this stuff and like showing people like, yeah, you can jump into this. And you've all seen his takes on social, I'm sure, where he walks through like the stuff he finds. And that same stuff happens in a dozen different Slack channels inside.
I think it's definitely true though that I don't know if AI transformation at an organization can be led grassroots, like bottom up. I think you really do need a leader who's in it and walking the path he wants the organization to walk. I think when our organization is doing this, our CTO has been obsessed. He's the number one token user in the entire organization. You see it with David a little bit too. I mean, I think the organizations that I point to with the most successful people, it's because it has a leader that's showing his org how he wants them to use it rather than telling them what he wants them to get out of it. And I think those are the orgs where you're like, I expect the 10X. Where's my 10X type organizations? The ones where people are actually in there following, I think those engineers have had so much more success with AI because they kind of know what to do or how to proceed. What do you think about that?
I think there's that whole like hot takey, you can just go build things thing. I think there's a lot of companies that just like say that and maybe it doesn't actually play out. But I think like, and not to like hype Sentry up too much, but I think like a good leader who like actually just goes and does that and actually says, I'm going to go ship this. And they get like a little pushback from someone who asks like, oh, well, what about this? And he's like, no, sorry. We're rolling forward on this. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out as we go. I think it sets a tone, and I think it sets like it makes it okay for you to go and experiment and explore more. And David's never someone who like fences that off, which is like one of the things I like about it is that like he never says that, oh, well, it applies to me, but not to you. He would have, if it was up to him, everybody in the company would ship as fast as he does. And that's what he encourages. And I think to your point, like it can't really be grassroots, but it does have to have grassroots people who want to move fast, right? You kind of have to have both. You have to have a leader who's like, I'm going to move fast. And you need to have like 10 to 12 people who are like, yeah, I'm in, let's go, let's cook.
So one more thing about this like culture thing, because I know that you had posted, I saw your name pop up in a newsletter like a month or two ago for the Cursor newsletter, talking about, this really kind of cool, I won't explain the stories, I'll let you explain if you'd like to, but this tool that you all are using inside of your Slack. And it just occurred to me, like, we're a pretty relatively small company, at least relative to some of these big enterprises that exist. And like, sometimes you'll see so-and-so has installed this bot into your Slack instance and you're like, oh my goodness, what's going on here now? Like, how much more crazy must that be at a place like Sentry where you have so many people innovating and playing and trying things? Like, how have you guys approached AI experimentation and adoption when you're a big organization that has to keep running the way it's been running, right? So it's like you have to contain some of that play, but also embrace it. How does that trade-off work?
I mean, like, like hot take. Do you have to contain it, right? I think like if you have like good safe areas to like play with it and explore, like, do you want to contain it? Because like the gains you're going to get off of not containing it are probably greater than like the risk. And no one's saying like ship everything to prod and force push to main. Like that's not the same thing. But I think like going in and just tearing at something without a lot of like worry behind it is probably going to gain you a lot more ground forward. Like I had a leader once tell me like no company has ever failed from shipping too much, right? No startup has ever failed from trying to ship too much. And I think like there's a lot of truth in that. So yeah, I don't know if I think like unconstrain the exploration on it. Go dive in, try the big thing. The cursor thing was really cool though. It was, it started off as like this very small, like we got invited to try out. They had the background agents thing that they had rolled out, and you can get to it from inside the UI, but they also created a Slack bot for it. So you could go and you could request to be a Slack bot, and it would go and fire off a background agent. And we tried it off against one small repo. And then a couple of us added it to different channels that weren't. So like I have the docs team that reports underneath me, and so like I added it to the docs repo, and then my boss added it to the marketing team channel where we like handle like the website builds and stuff like that. And 3 or 4 of us started like showing people, hey, you can go and query it this way. And it just kind of lit a fire out where people added this into like some of the SDK channels and some of the core channels for the product. And so what happened is it created this like lowering of the barrier, right? So like instead of having to jump into an IDE and install Cursor and know like how to navigate around that, now all of a sudden people were just going into Slack channels and saying, hey, I need to change the header text on this or the H1 text on this, all the way down to like really advanced stuff like, hey, there's a fallback parameter inside of the SDK that's not responding right. We need to adjust this or find a way to do this part, and then it firing off, and it just again spread like wildfire. So there's a ton of these like build channels now inside of the Sentry Slack where it's just like the team that owns that thing firing off these build commands to like change parts of the software. And does 80% of them get merged? Probably not. But do people get a ton of value out of like the research that comes along with it? And does it help them find like their path forward a lot more? Yeah, totally. And I think like we're seeing it more and more, the changes that go through those actually getting merged in. And I think like, I don't know, that whole go back to the whole like culture of experimentation thing. Like it makes that a lot easier for people to jump into, especially people who aren't maybe like deeply technical or don't want to spend the time like figuring out how to configure their IDE right. They just jump in and like they query it, then go in and view the PR. And it's really great. I think like it lets people who aren't as deep technical still explore and still experiment in a way that's like very easy for them. And it blew up. Like it was not in a bad way. Like it blew up in a really good way. Like there's a ton of people using it, and like it's been something that's added to like a lot of acceleration for sure.
Yeah, you need that kind of improv culture, that yes-anding. That's been really successful for us in AI, is somebody shares and then somebody goes, yes, and we could use it this way or try it on this problem. And someone goes, oh, yes, and we could do that. Like if you have a good yes-and culture, I think that really helps with AI adoption.
I think you want to chase those like light bulb moments where, because like it's one thing if I came and told you like, oh, did you know you can use background agents for this or Claude Code for that? Oh, cool, I'm going to go try that out. But when you actually start having your own ideas with it, and when you start seeing it and you start thinking, wait, so like I could take this and do that, that's kind of like those really cool moments that like I think are like changing a lot inside of software development right now. Like the people are finding these like really new ways to approach old problems, but like to really crack open like really complex and challenging things. And again, not everything we try in there is a merge candidate. Not everything is going to ship to prod. But do you walk away from almost all of these like learning a bunch more and knowing a bunch more than you did when you went in? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, another one of the things that, I know that teams I've been on need, and it's insight into the ways that some of the things that we're building with AI behave. Now, I don't just mean using AI to construct it, but literally products that have AI inside of them. I think many of us, most of our teams at this dot, have Sentry in the back end already helping us keep track of what our users are doing on our front ends, on our back ends, our errors, response rates, all that kind of stuff, all that instrumentation that we need. But, that's a need that we have in our AI products. I think it sometimes can be hard. People feel like just because AI is probabilistic, that it's unknowable. And sometimes that the products that you build with AI in them feel like it's impossible to know why they do what they do. You just hope that they do the right thing. And I think, you guys are kind of helping to illuminate the fact that maybe that's not the case. So I was wondering if you could explain a little bit about what you guys have released so far as helping people keep track of the ways that their agents are performing, and maybe just get us started on kind of how that works.
Yeah, you kind of hit on like an interesting part of that. Like these are non-deterministic systems, right? So like a lot of random stuff comes out when you put things in. But the problem is like it's not always clear what's going in, and it's not always immediately clear exactly what came out. And so we started having this a lot with like we built a MCP server that's really like kind of gotten a lot of attention on it. David led that effort a lot. And it was like a very forward leading on being like a remote first one, so not locally installed, had OAuth. But as we started like querying this thing and starting to work with it a ton, we started finding like results weren't always consistent. It wasn't always giving us the right returns back. And we started seeing this in other areas of like the AI tooling also. And we started hearing it from customers too. It's like, hey, I'm building these things and like I'm asking the AI for things, and those things are not the same stuff coming out that I expected them to be. And so it really got us thinking down this path of like, this is like a whole different kind of monitoring, because it's not so much about like, is the thing up or down, as much as it is like what's actually happening with it. And we saw this a lot with, there was one of the times where they moved like protocols for the MCP server. And what we found when we were testing it out is we'd go and ask a question to it, and it would come back and say, oh, let me try to find this a different way, or let me try a different parameter here. And what actually was happening behind the scenes was this was an error every time, but we weren't catching it because the system was trying to correct itself, right? It's trying different parameters, different paths, trying to send different information up to see if it can actually get the result out. And like, if you take this away from Sentry, you don't look at it through that lens, you can see the same thing in like booking systems. You can see the same thing in different chatbots where they try to get to like the solution. That's one of like kind of the beauties and one of the powers of AI systems is like, it's not just a yes or no. Sometimes it's, oh, let me try to figure out the path to it. But most of the time we didn't have good visibility into that. And so we started building this out to be able to say, oh, cool, we're going to track this stuff and monitor this stuff a little bit differently. And we're going to give good like insights into it. And like when you switch between models, how does token usage get impacted by that? How does error rate change between that? How do tool calls get impacted during that? And it's been pretty cool to watch, because we built this thing kind of from the ground up inside of the product, and then we bolted on MCP monitoring on top of that. That just came out last week for similar problems, like trying to really get like better visibility to what's happening with this stuff, and like understand how you can start to influence like outcomes from it, influence like the different things systems actually start to run. And again, it's been pretty cool to watch. It's cool to watch. Like for example, when GPT-5 dropped a week ago, 2 weeks ago, it's been a crazy time. Watching like the duration of calls change between models. Like if you go from like a Sonnet 4 to a GPT-5, and being able to watch, wow, like duration calls went way up, token usage went way up on GPT-5. Like it gives you like a really good way to like quantify how that stuff changes. I think like that's a lot of this stuff is going to be the new norm. This stuff is going to be happening a lot, and we use it on the MCP server. We use it on a lot of our backend systems to be able to track the stuff today.
MCP, it's the talk of the town right now. I remember at AI Engineer, it was without a shadow of a doubt the most attended workshop line and event line for sure. I have a lot of thoughts on MCP. I know we're doing a lot within that sector. I've built several MCP servers at this point. I'm a big fan of it. But I guess like from your perspective, like what is Sentry's angle with this? Like, what are you seeing the big value at having it and utilizing it and putting it out there?
Yeah, here's my take on it. I think this lines up pretty well with the company take. You can go and get a lot of this information step by step, right? So like, let's use the Sentry MCP server as an example. So like, the ground floor value prop of the MCP server for us is giving you context into what's happening inside of your applications back to the LLM. So like errors, logs, all that stuff. All this stuff is available over REST today. You can go out and you can query each one of these endpoints and you can pull them together and feed each one of these lines in, but you're going to be stitching together a bunch of different calls to get there, right? Whereas we can start using these tool calls to go and like just pull all this stuff together for you and start to query it like more natural language. And then you can have systems also call into this and use these tool calls to go and accomplish things. And so instead of having to do all this manual patchwork to bring all of this stuff together, you can start using the LLM to its full power to start stitching these things together and have tool calls call other tool calls to populate information out. It's like one of my favorite queries that we run inside of the MCP server now, not to turn this at all into an ad for Sentry MCP, but like we go in and say, give me the 5 issues in this project that are easily solvable. And it'll go in and it'll grab those issues and then it'll grab logs from them. And then if necessary, it'll go and grab performance information and trace information. And like, it just makes it very easy to take a bunch of stuff that you had to gather from, 10, 20 different places and bring them into like one place. And then you can take that and say, now go fix it to, a Claude code or a cursor. And it goes and it attacks solving that problem. And like, you start layering in some of the other things we do for like group, like we have an AI debugging agent that'll go and run and pull a lot of this together too. And now when it factors that in also, it's just giving so much more context into like the typical debugging workflow of copy and paste error and say, can you fix please? Like that. I feel like we all probably do that a lot right now. Like an error message pops up and you left click, highlight, paste in cursor, please fix, please help me, and just hope. This gives you a lot more context into like what's happening back in systems, all that. So again, I think like short answer, bringing better context together without having to go and stitch it together manually or try to figure out what you should stitch together manually.
Say that a picture's worth 1,000 words, and one of the things is that when you see what this capability is doing with Sentry, with the AI stuff, I think it's quite potent. I think for a lot of developers, they might incorrectly perceive that like when they send a prompt into an agent, it just is doing one thing and then it's just returning. So there's just, I do input, I do output, right? And it's like, they don't necessarily see how that spirals out or spiders out from there. So how can people understand like what is in a trace that Sentry would be able to even give me information on? Like, what are the parts, I guess, of responding in these products that might even show up on a trace that people might be interested in seeing?
Yeah, there's properties you attach to it, right? So like you might add custom attributes to it. So I'll use like a really campy example of if I was running a store, I might attach it to attributes like the total cart value, or I might attach like the most commonly purchased item, right? Like things like that might get attached. So we can pull that stuff out. There's the raw stuff like latency, how long it takes a call to run. There's the systems it's connecting out to, right? Because like that's something that gets lost when you just copy and paste an error messages. Like, is that message actually coming from the system you're connecting to, or is it a downstream error that's being passed up through the system you're hitting, right? So that stuff ends up inside of tracing. In stack traces, like where it's happening inside of the code, what's happening around it. But then we can take that and we can start to infer from there what logs happened around there. Like we rolled out a logs product, so we can see what logs were captured around there. And at the same time, what was distributed tracing doing at that point? And like you start getting this whole picture of when something's actually broken, as opposed to just like errors broke, help me fix help me fix this problem.
The thing that blows my mind looking at some of the pictures of this though too is that it has this view of like your token spend and where in the flow the tokens are getting spent, and like your tool calls and your tool call lag. So you can tell if just one of the tools in your that your agent is using is for some reason taking really long, or for some reason it's using a ton of tokens at one part of the flow, and you need to clean that up. Or I love that ability to just see a timeline and really get into debugging things rather than, again, doing that black box tweak a thing, see what happens, tweak a thing, see what happens type of situation.
Here's another twist on that. I was debugging this one. I had this like fun little side projecty thing. Like, I think we're all building side projects right now to learn this stuff more and use it more. So I have this like ship builder thing that goes and builds like build sequences out, and it's like very non-optimized like database calls on the back end. And there's an AI component that goes and I feed it a prompt and it goes and builds me out kind of what I want my app to do. And I was testing this out and I was just noticing it was chewing on it for ages. And I went down this path of, I've really messed up these tool calls. Like, I've really got to figure out how to actually fix this. This was before we rolled out the agent monitoring stuff. And so like I was digging in, trying to figure out like, how do I optimize this more? Turns out I just really messed up the query behind the scenes. Like the SQL query behind the scenes was just really jacked up. And that was taking ages to actually run. And it wasn't actually the AI query at all. It was the backend one. But I went down this path of just like hammering on this tool call, trying to figure it out. Then we rolled out agent monitoring. And I could see, okay, well, the actual tool call portion of this is like 20 milliseconds. It was very fast, but the database call was like 8 seconds behind the scenes. Those things like aren't immediately apparent. If you're a user using, a chatbot app, or you're on, an airline buying tickets and it says I'm thinking, you automatically attribute it to like, oh, this is AI slop and this is trash and it's taking ages. But in reality, like these back end systems are still unoptimized. And as we start generating more code via AI and like people do it a little like hot take, a little bit more irresponsibly, they're not looking at like, are the queries that I'm producing actually like really well done queries? Are we like optimizing these for the information I want out? Or are we just making it work? And a lot of times it's just going to be making it work. And then you're going to end up with these weird performance things that may or may not be like the AI's fault necessarily. So that was like an interesting, like real experience that happened to me of like letting it go and generate a bunch of database queries that I didn't pay attention to, and then blaming AI for it taking forever when in reality, I just was a bad programmer that day.
We'll be back to the episode in a second, but first, I'd like to acknowledge the team behind the channel, This.Labs. We're seeing 3x to 5x productivity improvements with our teams and clients using tools like Cursor, Claude Code, and GitHub Copilot. We help teams adopt these technologies and get max value out of them through strategic partnerships, trainings, and other software engineering services. Check us out at ai.this.co. Thanks, now back to the video.
So speaking of AI slop, one thing, I did something last week, and I kind of mentioned it to you a little bit before recording, but I feel like it plays really good into this. I put out a poll on like Twitter, LinkedIn, all the good stuff, asking software developers like, hey, and I'll read the exact question that I posed. And it was, software developers at this current time, do you believe that you are confident in your ability to use AI tools to produce a good response to a problem you are having? Whether AI is giving you the right reply or high code quality is not what I'm asking, but whether you believe you know how to do it. And it was very interesting because over 80% of the people that responded ended up saying, yeah, I know how to do that. Now, I don't like blanket statements, so I won't say everybody, but a very, 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 very big portion of that percentage I feel is inaccurate because I've worked with so many developers and I see how they prompt. Some of the prompts are just so bare bones basics that it's so hard to imagine how you could get something high quality out of it. And now I know somebody listening to this is going to be like, hey, Danny didn't say everybody, so obviously I'm not in that group. It's somebody else. You might be in that group for all I know.
You probably are in that group. At some one, it was like 8 out of 10 of your prompts probably fall into that one. 2 of them you sit down and carefully craft.
Well, because I remember I was working with one dev in particular. He prompted, he got a reply. He wasn't happy with it, and he literally wrote, "This doesn't work." And I'm like, but when you're saying this doesn't work, you in your mind have the context of what working looks like. And you can't just say it needs to do this. You need to give some layers to this. Now, I'm, especially with friends, known as like the king of long prompts. I'm like ridiculous with the lengths of my prompts.
You are a 10x software engineer guy, aren't you?
Oh God, no.
He gets paid by the token.
Oh. No. I have a Discord, and somebody was asking for help on like how they could prompt something to get a better response, and their prompt was like 3 lines, and mine was like 4 pages of a Google Doc. So it's like very, 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 very different. And they ended up saying like this was like a one shot almost. Like it got me 90% of the way there. And to me, that's kind of where my mind thinks. And I know some people, you know, they get into the stage where they're like, oh, you know, I like writing the code and this and that. And that's cool. Don't get me wrong. I love writing code too. And for a lot of stuff I will. But the things that I don't enjoy, the monotonous tasks, like I've never been geeked out about making a button, but I've always been geeked out about everything that button allows to happen behind the scenes. So like the algorithms and the way that you're filtering things and maybe putting it through a microservice. Like I love that part more than I love the beautification of said button. I want to control the triggers.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of, it's wild, man, because there's so many of us that love writing code. But if that's actually true, and I fall in the same bucket. I love building this. It's like Legos to me, right? It's like adult Legos here. I love it. But if so many of us really love writing code, why are so many of us so excited to go and prompt our way through having it built? And some of like the best engineers I know are just enamored with going in and having it like generate these applications. And like there's not a real clear answer to this question, but like if we love writing code so much, why are we all so much more excited to build right now when we can go and prompt this stuff out? And it's like it's a really interesting thing. Like I think that like we spend so much time on like the logic of solving really complex things, and AI is pretty decent at that part. Is it perfect at like every single implementation of it? No. But is it pretty good at finding like the general knobs that can be turned to make a thing happen? And I think there's something in there around that. But I do find it really interesting that like so many of us still love writing code. I don't hate writing code, but I really do love watching it go and build something out and then making my adjustments and going in and tuning, and like as I find things I want to correct, going and doing that. But it's an interesting thing to think about that again doesn't have like a really clear answer about why.
I'll say this though,
I have a theory on that.
Oh yeah. Well, I'll give my theory and then you can give a counter theory. So my thought on this is that I don't think that, like, for example, I'm super excited about using AIs, but I don't do it because I'm excited about not having to write the code, right? I think of it a little bit like watching The Flash or any speedster type situation, right? When they're running at normal speed and everybody else looks like they're in slow motion. Like, I love the ability that for the first time, my output can match my inspiration. Yeah. That like I can get the world to slow down and I can keep up with the ideas and the brainstorm, right? Like how many side projects die because you have to spend 3 days just setting up the infrastructure and you just get tired of it before you even really start, right? Or you just can't keep the momentum going. Like I just love that idea that I'm not constrained by the speed of my fingers and my knowledge of APIs to do the things I want to do and the products I want to build. So like for me, that's been the most exciting thing. Like I still reach for, I still would love to code, and that'll never change with AI. And I think, Danny, to your original point, do I even feel confident using the AI? And the answer that I'll give is no. And the reason I'll say no is because I'm right now with a team under a big deadline. And when that happened, did I reach for the AI to dig me out of it? No, I went back to what I knew I could do to get to this deadline, which was just turn some of the tooling off and just get the code written that I have to get written. And so I knew if in a moment of crisis I didn't reach for the tool, I'm still not there yet. And it's not because I didn't trust the AI. I just didn't trust my own piloting of the AI in this critical moment when every minute counts. And so I said, yeah, I'm not there yet. I still have more work to do.
I'm gonna pin that just to get to this theory, but I want to come back to that point too. My theory is this. I think the vast majority of the developers, especially that have multiple years of experience in the industry that are geeking out about AI now, I believe to a certain degree they still love to write code. But I think for a lot of them, and this might be a hot take, I don't even know if this is a hot take, the vast majority of people at like a tech lead level or above are never super geeked out to write code for work. They love writing their code for their side projects that do all the funky stuff that you could never do in a massive code base because nobody will know what the hell is going on. And so they're geeked out to do the fun, cool stuff there where you're at work, you're following like some style guideline. So it's like, oh, I've seen both sides of this coin. And so if this can get me through some of the monotonous parts at work, and then I can do some of the funky stuff at work that I'll enjoy, but now the person that follows behind me can actually follow it, I'm loving this even more now. And I will say a very, very good friend of mine who we've had on the podcast before, I believe, James Q. Quick. He said one thing. He tried V0 for the first time. He was very anti-AI for a while. And he said, this is the first time that I got so excited about AI to where I feel like I'm learning how to code again, like that excitement initially. And that's like because you're unveiling this whole new paradigm of ways to solve problems that just haven't really existed in our world before. And so I think there's that. That's my theory.
I'm gonna hot take on both of your takes. I'm here for it.
It's the yes and. Yep.
So I've definitely shifted more into the I'm just gonna try a prompt and see what happens. I reach for it as the first tool, like when I have a hard problem. Like it is the first one, even in like a raw, like to use your survey, Danny, like the really poorly optimized prompt. I'll fire off one of those just to see what happens and see how far inside the blast radius does this get me and how close does it get me. And then I would say 9 times out of 10, I'm a mile closer than I would have been starting from 0 myself. And so like I definitely reach for it first now. I wouldn't say I blindly like chase it through. I'll like check out, okay, how close really was it? It looks close. How close was it? But I definitely reach for it. And I'm talking on like going to like the geeking out on like your production code. I did this with the SDKs with the agent monitoring thing. There was a part of it that wasn't working right inside of my application specifically. I'd moved to HTTP streamable. I used a weird version of the protocol. We didn't handle it because we were still in beta and we were still building things. Like it wasn't even beta at this point. It was alpha. I was in the flag group for early access and just trying it out. And the engineer, Beta, he's Miguel. He works within Sentry. He's one of the engineers. He was on PTO, and so we were going to talk when he got back. And I was like, I'm going to prompt my way through this and just see what happens. And so I cloned down into my app project. I cloned down the Sentry JavaScript SDK repo, and I say, hey, here's what I'm expecting to see. I've turned on debug mode. Here's what I'm getting out of the debug logs. I'm not seeing this. The UI is blank. I'm not seeing spans come across for AI. I don't really know why. Can you look inside of the Sentry JavaScript SDK and help me figure out why? And Claude Code dug into it, went and found the code that Bete had written inside of it, found where the spans were at, found that I was sending up the wrong protocol from like the wrong calls on the HTTP streamable protocol. Said, yeah, you're not handling this right. Let me go ahead and try to fix it. And swear to God, the PR has been merged. Like I can show it to you right now. Like it found the problem, and then I said, "Can you give me instructions on how to actually implement this so that I can share it with?" I literally said to share it with one of my colleagues. It printed out a markdown, and then I was like, "You know what? Can you go ahead and just pull the PR for me and send this up?" And lo and behold, it went and actually pulled like the full PR, and I'm like sending him messages as this happens, and so like. I think in going back to where we started this conversation, in organizations that like welcome this and like places, like Sentry, it's welcome to go into that, especially like an open source, right? That's a great thing about open source. Like all the stuff's out there. And so like I can go and make these changes against core Sentry and pull them to JavaScript or against the JavaScript SDKs. And if somebody doesn't like it, they just decline the PR. But sometimes you find a broken thing that you actually get to fix. And now it's not this engineer's on PTO having to jump on his laptop to go and debug it. He finds way closer, like the problem way closer now because he sees the PR. And there was stuff still wrong in it. It wasn't handling everything. So he had to make adjustments. But it got him right to where like the issue actually was. And like I'd say 80% of that PR came from Claude in that case.
Yeah.
And so I think like you can geek out on this stuff at work, and like that's what makes it like really, for me, that's what makes it really fun is I can go and teach my daughters how to go and use this stuff to build. My daughter made a capybara petting zoo app over the weekend that was like super fun, but then I can go and use it for Hack Week things this week and fixing the JavaScript SDKs. And I think that's, I don't know, it's such a unique thing in software right now that like I don't know, like trying to get my 9-year-old to use Cursor feels like an insurmountable task.
AI powered Hack Week is just going to be the most fun thing ever for you guys.
It's wild. It's wild.
Here's the thing though, that I think is underappreciated and why I think some senior developers are actually having a lot of trouble with their adoption of AI. And it's that there are different qualities that make you amazing at code. And One of them can be something that I'm very naturally gifted at and I've honed over decades at this point, which is my ability to conceptualize a problem, break it up in ways so that my fingers can keep up with it. So when I code, even if I've done all the planning up ahead of time, there's this idea of certain things I carry in my head and then it comes out very orderly out of my fingers. And I know, and I have honed the ability to do that under pressure and under a time crunch to hit very tight deadlines. And I think when I use AI, a different skill is used, and that is my ability to comprehend code written by someone else. And I understand whether or not it meets the parameters that I need it to do. Yes, we all do that under PR, but if you're really trying to, under the gun, keep up with an AI, you need to have honed your ability to rapidly understand what somebody else is doing and not have to have it all be in your head. And so I think for me, that's the skill I have not yet learned. So AI is not yet the tool I reach for in a crunch. But if I have the space to stop and really think through a problem, set it up correctly, and have it try to get one shot, I have done very large features with AI doing almost entirely autonomous development. And then I had to do the development and the thinking and the review after the fact. But yeah, in a crisis, I still don't get there. And I think people underappreciate the different modes of thinking. And I think some people are more naturally gifted and honed, especially open source developers, very gifted at picking up code that they didn't write and trying to get to the center of it very quickly. And I think if you haven't had that experience, you may find you get frustrated sometimes using AI, and it's because you have this atrophied muscle you didn't realize you were never using to nearly this extent, and you just got to work it through. And I know I'm still working on it at this point.
But that's also like the structured thought thing is one that I think people don't value as much right now, and like they should, because I think like people who have really good structured thought and are able to like break this down into like what you want the system to do, that's a skill that's gonna just like amplify inside of AI, because like when you're relying on AI to do all of the structured thinking for you, like that's going to end up being a constraint. But when you can go through and say, this is how I as an engineer expect the architecture of this to work, AI operate inside of these bounds, almost every time you're going to produce better examples. This goes back to what like Danny was saying in his survey. Like I'd see this all the time, and it's always the person who has like the super negative hot take who says, build me a social media app in Next.js, and then complains that it didn't work. It's like, you've got to unpack this a little bit more. You got to give the system a little bit more pattern match than that. And they're upset that like it bleeds over in the input fields. Well, did you give it input constraints? Did you talk to it about that? No, you YOLO'd a one-liner prompt and then got frustrated when, just like if you went to a junior engineer and said the same one-liner, they wouldn't produce an application that you wanted. What did you think was going to happen? I just think people are still figuring out how to ask the questions to it. And like good, like to your point, Rob, like good structured thought is being able to ask the questions like really well to it. And I think that's where probably like the most of these prompt failures come from, is just like people not structuring out their thought, and they vote that they fully understand how to go and run this. Not everyone is that way, and not every prompt falls into that bucket, but I'm just as guilty of it sometimes. I'll ask it super vague questions, be like, why you break? Go fix.
That's actually really powerful. We're getting pretty close to the end here. So as we wrap up, I just wanted to close out our thought too, talking about the Sentry support, but so Sentry at large, but also Sentry for AIs. I know you guys have binders for Vercel, AI SDK, and a few others. Are there any things that people have to be using in order to experiment with these new features, or can they bring it into any AI platform that they're using? And also, where can they go to find out more about this product and about Sentry generally?
Yeah, we keep the docs really up to date. We got a pretty like thriving YouTube channel these days, so like that's always like, if you're more of like a visual audio learner, jump on the YouTube, listen to stuff. Docs are kept pretty well up to date. We're churning out a lot of like blog content. I hate to be the guy who tells you to go read a blog, but that like there's a lot on there too.
Get your AI to read the blog. It's okay.
Right, get your AI, summarize it. Come on. As far as like how to actually use it, so we've made some helpers that make it really easy for like certain frameworks, and we're like rapidly sending those out. Like the AI SDK is probably by far the best of those experiences. We did it for the Python OpenAI Agents SDK. I think the Anthropic SDK is rolling out here directly. The regular like TypeScript OpenAI SDK is coming. It's like we're doing a lot of like rapid prototyping to get these out and really make it like very easy to. If none of those work, you can still manually do it. Straight up, it's a bit sharp edgy right now. There's some pain in there just because like you're kind of hand stitching these things together. We wanted to validate out like, is this a thing people are really into? And it turns out they are. And so like we're working on making that a lot better. But you can use it with any of them and just manually construct it. And we have docs on that and some examples coming out. But like, hopefully we come out of this hack week with a few people building some tools to just automatically instrument it for you. So maybe this will be a very temporary problem. By the time this podcast airs, maybe it'll already be solved.
There you go. Well, last question, where are you hanging out in the community these days? Where can people find you if they want to follow what you got going on or connect with you or ask questions?
Yeah, I'm very active on X. I tend to post just a lot of free free flow of thought things around like things I'm building, things I'm exploring. I'm always available at Cody at Sentry.io if you have questions or even you want to just talk about this stuff. I love engaging with the community on these things. I sometimes feel like we've done a really good job of having software development communities, but not necessarily communities where we get to go be excited about like what we build. And so like I'm trying to figure out like good places to land and things like that, like places just talk about building stuff because I think a lot of people want to be able to share these things. But yeah, X is a good place, or drop me an email.
Awesome. Well, that's going to be it for us today, everybody. Thanks for listening to this Modern Web Podcast. Thanks, of course, to our guest, Cody. As we say, this conversation does not stop here. We'll put all of Cody's links and some of the things you heard about today in the show notes so that you can get easy access to everything. But as for me, you can find me online at RoboCell. You can find Danny at DThompsonDev. As for the podcast, you can find us online at moderndotweb.com or on Twitter at modern.web. As we close out, we would just like to thank today's sponsor, This.Labs, one last time, who would like me to remind you that This. Is dedicated to guiding companies through their modernization and AI transformation journeys. This.Labs is a tech consultancy that specializes in amplifying your technical capabilities, whether it's expanding your dev team with seasoned professionals or streamlining your project's journey from ideation to deployment. We work with clients like Google, Microsoft, PayPal, and more. Check us out at this.co. One more time, that's THISDOT.co. All right, see y'all next time. All right, did you want me to do the mid-read too, Danny, at this point?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. We got more of our episode to come, but first we'd like to take a break to thank today's sponsor, This.Labs. This episode is sponsored by This.Labs, your trusted experts in modern web development and AI consulting. We're not in the business of chasing trends. We're in the practice of moving technology forward with discipline, clarity, and intent. Our team brings deep engineering experience paired with strategic insight to help modern enterprises build smarter, faster, and more adaptive systems. From seamless LLM integrations to the development of AI-driven applications, we ensure that every solution is designed not only to meet today's challenges, but also to unlock the capabilities of tomorrow. We work with clients like Google, Microsoft, Stripe, Bill.com, and so many other great organizations. Check us out at ai.this.co. Big thanks to This.Labs for sponsoring this episode and for their commitment to advancing the developer community. All right, back to our episode.